What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest. I can't even say my own name. Alex Carter is in the house. Alex, welcome to today's show.
I'm pumped too. It's great to be here, Darius.
Oh my gosh, it's taken a couple minutes. In fact, it took a retake because my mic wasn't working. But we're here today after some time, and I'm so excited to have you. I met Alex a couple years ago through Halataha, a mutual friend of ours. And I was a client of hers, and Alex was a client of hers as well. And I asked Hal, I said, hey, do you have any references? And she referred me over to Alex, and we had a great conversation about just the work she was doing. And I was like, man, I really want to get her on the podcast. Took a couple beats to get you here, but so glad to have you. I'd love to give your formal bio really quickly. And then if you don't mind, would love to get some of your origin story for our audience who maybe aren't as familiar with your work. Does that work for you, Alex?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. So guys, Alex Carter is a negotiation expert. She's a clinical professor of law and the director of mediation of the mediation clinic, at the Columbia Law School. And she's written the best-selling book, Wall Street Journal bestseller, as a matter of fact, Ask for More, 10 Questions to Negotiate Anything. This was published by Simon & Schuster in May of 2020. She's a frequent commentator on negotiation and pay equity for women. And I'm so excited to have you here today. So Alex, what I'd love to do is give a little bit of origin story, because I doubt you just woke up one day and you were a negotiation expert, but would love to hear some of your background on how did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting, Darius, because I am now 16 years into a dream job that I almost didn't apply for because I didn't think I met 100% of the criteria. Sound familiar to anyone listening? So I was working as a lawyer at a large New York City law firm. And I had always dreamed about returning to academia and teaching. And I had a professor who encouraged me to do so. But I almost let the application deadline lapse because I thought, well, I don't really have a lot of teaching experience. But then I applied some of my own lessons and I thought, let me start with what I do have. And I went in with nothing to lose and out-interviewed a bunch of much more experienced people. And so here I am as a Columbia Law professor. A few years into that, people started calling me one by one to ask to come into their organizations and train them in negotiation and conflict resolution. And what's interesting is that because in my day job, I work by helping people come together over some of the most difficult and thorny business disputes and find a way out of conflict, I found that I was approaching negotiation in a way that I knew could help people. And I wanted to help them before they got into court, before their relationships went south, and before businesses were destroyed. In fact, I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to use what I had learned in mediation to make people's lives better and help them ask for more. And so gradually I built a framework and I figured out that there was one major underutilized superpower in negotiation that if people learned how to harness, it would change their lives. And so that was the origin story for my second job now, which is the CEO of a training and consulting company known as Ask for More, where I help people and businesses around the world just make better deals and have a lot more fun doing it.
I love that. So did you always, like, growing up, did you always envision that you were going to become an attorney? Was that like, because I mean, like, I was a person in fourth grade where someone said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I told them I want to be an attorney. And the reason I said that is because a lawyer, I don't think I knew that they were called attorneys, was because I was like, oh, they're rich. Right. So like for me, that was look, I'm half Persian. Like you're either a doctor or a lawyer when you're
Yep.
Persian. But so I didn't go into law. Funny enough, though, I am private equity now, and I'm like literally up to my eyeballs in lawyers, always working on negotiating our deals. So this is gonna be a fun conversation today. But did you always know you want to be an attorney?
You know, I had an inkling when I was young because my father was an attorney, and I remember asking him, what does a lawyer do? And he said, Daddy gives people advice and they give him, in return, their nickels and dimes. And I thought, this is great. I love telling people what to do. Maybe I should consider this as a career. And you'll be interested to know, Darius, that the deal was sweetened because my dad told me not to go to law school. And so,
Wow.
of course, what does a teenager do? Right? They do exactly the opposite of what their parent says. And I too, I'm a firstborn kid, right? Oldest child in my family. I thought I'm achievement oriented, not so much into science and math. So maybe I'm not going to be a doctor, just like you, Darius, right? See, I'm Irish and Italian, but maybe we have some of the same bent. And I thought, well, all right, so maybe I'll go to law school and see what it is. But I went to law school with absolutely no idea of what I was going to do afterward. I basically just pushed the default button and went to the most prestigious firm that I possibly could and trusted that I was going to figure it out from there. And really, it was about the relationships I built and starting to learn more about myself, where my talents were and what excited me, that led me to this position where now I have a tremendous platform I can use to help other people. And I wake up every day. I might not be the richest, right? But I can provide for my family and I am doing what I know I was born to do. And for me, there is no greater feeling of satisfaction than that. It's what I want for everybody.
I love that. So we're both half Italian, so we have that in common.
Oh, see, there we go.
Yes. Yeah, it all makes sense now. Um, so did you, when you were like, obviously, like you're like the rebel, and you was like, I'm not going to do what my dad does, and then here you are doing it. What type of attorney was your father? Was he just a business attorney? What type of a law did he practice?
He was a trusts and estates attorney. And what's interesting about that is that when I told him I was going into litigation, he said, why would you do that? It's just procedure. I have client relationships. I'm helping people build things. And what's really interesting, and one of the things I admire about my father's law practice, is that he was a real counselor. He built relationships with his clients, like lifelong relationships. And yes, those were lucrative, right, for both of them. But he derived great satisfaction from it. And that's really the model that I've adopted now, both in my practice at Columbia and then, private speaking and consulting clients I take on. We are partners together. We have long-term relationships. My goal is that our work together and our relationship is going to produce a lot for you. And if I do my job well, it's also going to produce a lot for me, right? And there's a lot of satisfaction in that.
I love that. Did you, like, I've always been like kind of a natural debater, and like my family, probably to the dismay of my siblings and my mother. But were you always like being a negotiator, being an expert in negotiation? Did you always find yourself like loving the strategy of like winning an argument? Was that what did that draw you to it? Like what was it about your personality that you think drew you to it most?
I think you might be surprised to hear this. Sometimes I did enjoy debating and winning, but I struggled with a lot of self-doubt. And I also was raised in a somewhat gendered time where I got mixed messages, especially as a woman, about what I could ask for. And maybe it was more important to be nice or to be liked than it was to get what I needed. And part of the reason that I really enjoy teaching, training, writing, and coaching people now is that I haven't always felt comfortable asking for more. And so I can really speak to a lot of the self-doubt that can creep in for folks, or a lot of the internal hurdles that we have to get past. In fact, Darius, The reason that Ask for More is called Ask for More is a moment when I almost flunked a major negotiation. So early on in my career, I was in the kind of job where everything was lockstep. Not sure if you ever did that. If you started out as an analyst, right, at a major private equity firm or an investment bank, like I did, a lot of those were lockstep. First time I ever had to negotiate for myself, I had a range in mind, and the initial offer came in above, which now I know just means I didn't have the right information. But there, I was thrown off balance. I thought, maybe I should just take this. But I had just enough sense on the ball to say, thank you, let me run my numbers, I'll get back to you. And I called a senior woman in my field, and I asked her, what should I do? And she said, I'm going to tell you what to do, Alex. You're going to get back in there, and you are going to ask for more. And here's why. Because when you teach someone how to value you, you are teaching him how to value all of us. So if you're not going to go in there and do it for yourself, I want you to do it for the woman who's coming after you. Do it for the sisterhood. And in that moment, I thought, I'm not sure what the profanity level on your podcast is, so I'll say that
it's R-rated or X-rated. Go whatever
okay,
you
great.
want.
Okay, so maybe not the X, but I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So now I have to negotiate. I mean, here I was thinking, if I negotiate for myself, that leaves less for other people. And in that moment, I had a complete reframe. I realized that when I ask for more for myself, I can normalize what it means to respectfully and collegially ask for your full worth, and knowing that I can back it up with my performance 100%. And then someday when I'm in a position of leadership, I'm going to be able to expand the table for other people and treat them the way that I was treated. I also realized that when I ask for more, it benefits other people even as an entrepreneur, because every single person listening to this knows what it feels like to undervalue and undersell yourself. What happens? What's the version of you that shows up for that client? It's not your best version. So these days, when I'm thinking about pricing myself as an entrepreneur, I price it in the place, going back to that advice, right? Normalizing for other entrepreneurs what it means to negotiate their worth, but also I want my client to have the Alex Carter that shows up 110% fired up to do that job and do it to the absolute best of my ability, right? They deserve that. I deserve that. And so that's why my mission is to help people understand that asking for more is not just great for you, it benefits other people.
I love that. I have a couple things, questions and thoughts. First of all, we're both Gen X, so shit is PG in 1984. Just
Look at me. I'm so edgy, Darius, right? The law professor is like, oh no, can I say shit on your podcast?
No, it's so like I have kids. My kids are 14 and 10, and we'll watch like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I'm like, there's these like PG shot someone in the head and dropping SH bombs. I'm like, this is my wife's looking at me. We're like, okay. I'm like, I guess things were different in the 80s, so that's kind of funny. But you said something though that I wrote down, which is teach people how to value you. Like, talk about that, because I think like obviously, especially when folks come in with an offer in mind, they have their own perceptions and their own bits of information, maybe perceptions of A, your value, B, perceptions of what the value of that role is. And then from that, they formulate some sort of decision. Now, maybe someone that is a taker might have a lower perception of value and a higher perception of what they're giving, right? Or that they want to get the best deal, even at your expense, maybe being short-sighted around how that'll make you feel and how you might maybe not take the deal or perform or have a, think they're a jerk or something like that. But yeah, to tell us what you mean, teach them your value. I'd love to, or how to value you. What is that? Like, how does that work? What does that mean? Why would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it starts, first of all, long before numbers are on the table, right? In fact, I think it could be argued that the personal brand you put out there to the world, right, if you are a company or an entrepreneur, is starting the work of teaching people how to value you. Who are you? uniquely, right? So one of the things that I love to teach people is that negotiation isn't just numbers. Society and media show us the numbers, right? They show us the last couple of rounds of negotiation. But what they don't show is the setup. And the setup is critically important. You need to be using strategically words and messages to train people on how to value you and your worth from the very moment that you start speaking. And in fact, even from your communications that they're reading before they get you on a call. So what I like to do, number one, the way I think about negotiation is in two phases. It's the mirror and the window. Okay. So the mirror is where negotiation starts. It starts with me negotiating with myself first. And what does this mean? It means developing a rock solid understanding of who I am, right? My unique value proposition. And I love when I ask people, tell me about yourself, and they give me their title. And instantly I'm asleep, right? This tells me nothing about you. I want to know the verbs. I want to know what you do, your secret sauce, what makes you different from the thousands of other people with that same title, whether it's an entrepreneur or in corporate, all around the world, right? What's you uniquely, okay? So thinking about that, and then thinking about the problems that you enjoy solving and what people can do as a result of their work with you, right? So that is part of the negotiation with yourself. I also then spend time thinking about, what do I need from this negotiation? This gets back to ask for more and the questions that I am asking myself before I ask anybody else. And so by the time I have negotiated in the mirror, I have a solid sense of who I am. I have a sense of what I need, both, monetarily, tangibly, but also, and this is important, the intangibles. What are the values that are meaningful for me when I work with somebody? Because have you ever had a deal that looked right on paper and in your gut you just thought, no, something is off? Those are the intangibles speaking to you. It's critically important. So I do a needs audit before I even sit down with anyone else, right? I'm thinking about the tangibles I need, the title, the money, right? The resources, whatever it might be. And also, maybe I have a value of collaboration. I like to work with my clients a certain way. I have a value of autonomy. I want to be trusted to deliver the material that I know will be best for the client, etc. Then I get in, and then because I've done this work on myself, I am able to be laser focused 100% on them. And what I find with inexperienced sales teams is that oftentimes people will lead with themselves when they get into this meeting. Hi, I'm Alex Carter. Here's everything I can do. I. Did you know research shows that if you use the first person singular too much, I this, I that, here's what I can do, Darius, here's what the investment is to work with me, here's what I want. It actually makes you come across as insecure and more junior. Instead, what you should be doing is what we should all be doing. Number one moneymaker before asking a question is shutting up. In fact, leaving periods of silence in a negotiation has been proven to make it more likely that you're going to get high value moves, right, from the other side. So I go into that meeting, I'm focused on them. Tell me about your business. Tell me about you personally, Darius. Where are you looking to go in your career? Even if I'm working for your company as a client, how can I serve you personally and help you advance towards where you're going? I get to know you and your business holistically. And so then I can matchmake intelligently between what I know I can offer and the biggest problems that you need to solve, right? And I do that by a whole lot of listening and asking questions first before I ever talk about myself. So that's what it means to, from the beginning, set up and teach people how to value you. And part of the way I do that is by modeling and showing them the value I see in them. Then when we get to the numbers, we're much more likely to have the numbers I want because I'm solving the right problems for them.
I love that. So I'm hearing that a lot there. One of the biggest things is there's, and I always talk about this with people. It's like, it's making it about them. What's in it for them? People want they want to know the value that they're going to get for themselves. Inevitably, we're all selfish creatures. I mean, our DNA is designed to do this. And I think that's really smart, the thought around, especially from an initial negotiation, maybe when people don't know you as well, or they haven't negotiated with you on this new thing. One of the areas, though, that I'd love to get your thoughts on, and this is an area that I've seen in a lot of the deals I've done, and I've done a lot of deals at this point. And what I found is, I have two things I've learned. One is if I negotiate too good of a deal for myself, it backfires sometimes, right? And so I've had the perspective that if I make it too rich, where the person doesn't feel like they got a fair shake, that they will figure out ways to undermine the deal in the deal. Because they'll be like, this isn't fair, and they'll just start looking for you can't paper everything up, right? And so they'll start to figure out ways to erode the deal or to rebalance the deal. And nobody wants to end up in court, and there's a reason why 99% of deals don't end up in court, because people will end up negotiating outside of court, but nobody wants to spend their energy doing that. So one of my perspectives has always been, I don't want to make the deal too rich, because if it's too rich and not fair, then I'll get retraded on in some way that I don't like later. What are your thoughts on that?
I once did some work for a company. This was years ago. And this is a major company in an industry, everybody would have heard of this company, all right? And their CEO enjoyed a lot of market power at the time I was working for them, because of the way the industry was set up. And Darius, this man thrived on humiliating the other side, right? So he would get everything they needed, and then he delighted in taking that last little penny, not just so he could win, but so that they could lose, right? And in a very competitive bargaining style. Okay. Fast forward a few years, the market completely changes. The structure changes for a variety of regulatory and other reasons. All of a sudden, this CEO, this company, this sector of the industry has a lot less negotiating power. And what happens? People he was negotiating with 3 years ago delighted in returning the favor, taking every last dollar from him. And he was out, right? And the company suffered greatly. And so this is a firsthand example, right? Careful, I don't want to reveal anything about the person or the industry, but it's a common tale. You never know what circumstances are going to be a few years down the road. And one of the most powerful pieces of negotiation advice I ever received, I received on a trip that I took to a war-torn area, two sides of a conflict. And one of the negotiators told me, Alex, we're never going to solve this conflict until we figure out how to write the other side's victory speech. Every person you negotiate with has to write either a literal or a metaphorical press release to the people they are answering to. And if you can find a way to get what you need and also leave them enough to write them so they can write that victory speech, that is a person who will come back to you over and over again. And in the long run, it's going to be much more lucrative for you 99% of the time.
I love that. And it kind of goes back again to this perspective around like value, right? Like what's in it for them, right? And letting them win, because again, people want to feel like they won, right? They want to feel like that they got what they needed. So I like that perspective of how are they going to, like, I'll use the example of, in private equity, we would take that stuff to our investment committee. They got to feel like I know the investment committee is going to think about it in a certain way. So they got to feel like they got the right deal, right? So that makes a lot of sense. One of the things, so one of the questions I have for you is, in business, what I've found is my most, I would say, like, painful negotiations are the ones that happen in the deal after the initial negotiations happen. The initial negotiations, because you don't know what you don't know in the original deal, right? And I think a lot of times people negotiate in good faith because they want the deal to happen. And then you get married, and like most marriages, you just have to start accepting people for their blemishes and for their shortcomings. And then you're deep into the deal at this point, and you're like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. And And I was talking to a guy I advised today, and I said, look, integrity is like what you do when you have nothing to gain from somebody else, right? And what I find is a lot of times people's integrity show up then, some good, some bad. But, when you're in the deal, now it's not like walking away. Usually you're so pot committed, right? You have so much money that's been put into it as far as capital, time, all these things that like now your the commitment levels are so high that just I'm not going to, walking away is unlikely and less likely. And whereas in an initial negotiation, you haven't made that 3, 5, 10-year commitment into something. When things start to go sideways and a lot of renegotiation happens. What is your perspective on approaching negotiation when you're pot committed, when you're in the deal, when people are trying to retrade because things have changed and it doesn't make sense like the way it did when you didn't have as much information? How do you approach helping people negotiate in those situations? Because I feel like at that point, a lot of times the leverage is different. When you're stuck in the deal. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I'm telling you, for me, every deal I've had,
yep,
that's when it gets hairy, and that's when the people are horse trading, and that's when it's like, God, had I known this going in, I wouldn't have done that. And I just would love to hear your perspective, because that's when I feel like there's the most amount of to be gained and lost.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question, and I'm going to, for a moment, answer from my Columbia law professor hat, and then move into the negotiation realm. So I am a big fan of when contracts or deals are being negotiated, putting in a clause that says, right, basically a mediation clause that says, if anything goes down, right, in the future, the parties agree that they're going to sit down, and work it out first, right, and make that attempt. And I find, it's useful not only for protection, but as kind of a pressure valve, right? Because I think we can normalize that any marriage takes work. Except mine. My husband and I are both perfect. We're living a completely blissful life. So other than, isn't that amazing how that works, Darius? That's so great.
We're incredible humans.
Right. Everybody can aspire. So I hear, though, however, that other people have things they need to work on in their marriages and things to negotiate. And so I think it's quite normal to say, right, we're really excited about this. Let's make sure we're keeping the communication going, right? Stuff always comes up, right? So we'll plan for that eventuality, and you have that clause in place. So I always advise clients, from a legal perspective, have something in place so that somebody's not running to the courthouse immediately if you think that could happen, right? And then, so that's ex ante, right? I think ex post, right, after the deal, once again, I think this is where I want to think about, motivations and leverage, right? What's in it for them to sit back down, and how can I frame what we need in a way, right, that they're going to be able to swallow, but then hopefully they're also going to have incentive, right, to participate and stay in the deal. I don't know what you found, but a lot of times there is incentive on both sides, right, to stay in it, because both sides are committed, pot committed, as you said, in a certain way. So there, the biggest pitfalls I see are that people can personalize it sometimes on both sides, right? I say, well, that guy is the problem, right? And that person says, Alex is the problem. And one of the earliest things I learned in negotiation before I wrote my own book came from Getting to Yes, seminal book in the field by Fisher and Urey. And they talk about separating the people from the problem. I find that depersonalizing it and saying, hey, so this has come up, right? And making it about the circumstance rather than about you or me really helps to normalize and set the tone, and maybe take some heat down from the personalities so that people can get over that stuff, get in the room, and hammer out what they need to hammer out. I also think, from a negotiation perspective, that the more you think about not just your short-term needs, but your long-term needs before you're inking the deal, could help people a little bit imagining, right, the pitfalls that might arise at the 2-year, the 5-year, the 10-year mark, and trying to solve for those in advance. I also like to say conflict is data. and conflict is a testing mechanism, right? So every conflict we have is good data that can help us be better drafters and better business people in the future. And every conflict we have is a testing mechanism for how good the contract or the agreement is. And so when something comes up, I've experienced this, when I'm managing people or, in my corporation, something happens, a screw up happens, and I'm like, all right, this is useful information. Let's go back and figure out what systems failed so that we can reverse engineer for the future, right? So that this doesn't happen again. Forward looking, non-blaming, separate the people for the problem. Once again, figure out what's in it for them.
I love that. What do you think about when you're negotiating with someone and you feel like they're being maybe taking it personally, or they're being emotional, or and the outcome that you're getting to is just, you're like, this is fundamentally feels unfair. If you're trying to maybe like back that up or reverse that a little bit or get them to a better place, when when it just feels like, man, this is not, like, we're not doing the right thing here, this is unfair, or there's someone, a party in a negotiation that's really kind of just taking a pound of flesh, and you're like, man, this isn't right. Like, how do you approach that in a way that doesn't feel like you're personalizing it, or you're just trying to get a little bit better of an outcome? Because I do believe, and I've talked to a lot of folks about this from a negotiation standpoint, that there is an outcome people will take, right? It may not be the outcome you want, right? But let's say that you're even beyond that, and you're just trying to get them back to something more reasonable. How do you approach that? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So, emotions are at play in every negotiation. Even if you are negotiating on behalf of a company and not on behalf of yourself, I'm sure you've seen it many times, Darius. People don't want to have feelings, but they do. In fact, in Ask for More, I call feelings the F word in negotiation because nobody wants to talk about it, right? And yet we all have them. So it's been conclusively demonstrated. So what I find is that there are two emotions, I call them the big two, that blow up deals more than any other. And they make people act irrationally. And so when I see a whole lot of heat or, anger or hurt or irrational behavior, stuff that looks irrational to me coming from somebody else, I ask myself whether they are dealing with one or both of the big two. And the big two are fear and guilt. Those are the emotions that make us come raging out of the cage, right? With all sorts of aggression and irritation toward the other side. And so I like to ask myself, what might this person be fearing? What are they feeling guilty for? And oftentimes I will figure out part of what is raising the heat so dramatically in that room. Okay. Then I employ, this is where my training as a mediator has been extraordinarily helpful, because what I do is de-escalate situations like this all day long. And I do it by using two techniques. One is called looping or reframing. Okay. You sit there and you launch a bunch of invective at me. Here's what you screwed up. You screwed up this, you screwed up this, you screwed up this. Or I'm desperately unhappy with these three things. And instead of hearing that and rebutting and saying, but Darius, right? Look, I was born in Brooklyn, but I'm now wise enough to know that the Brooklyn way of handling things, every action has an equal and an opposite reaction. The more I push, the more I argue, the more I am raising the temperature in that room. So the first thing I do is I repeat back what they've said. And I do it in a very non-escalating way. All right, Darius, thank you for letting me know. So what you've described to me is that I suck in the following three ways. Okay, so I suck like this, I suck like this, I suck like this. What have I missed? Straight up, right? No defensiveness, no sarcasm, like I am trying to get it. You'd be amazed at how often, and maybe I was being a little facetious in that language, right? But you'd be surprised how often, if I am making a legitimate attempt to understand and hear their concerns, people hear their own language played back and they chill out. They calm down. They're not expecting to be understood or heard in that moment. And I show them with complete non-defensiveness that I am ready. I'm a big girl. I can handle anything they have to throw to me. And I'd like to fully understand it first before I do anything else. So if somebody's very upset, I will loop for them for a good 5 to 10 minutes. And it really is amazing how often it chills it out. Okay. Second thing I do, if people are freaking out or they're saying no, is I ask them a 4-word question that I call my no buster question. Okay. So often when people say no or they're met with resistance, the question is why? Why don't you like that deal? Why aren't you doing this? Why are we having this problem? I'm sure it won't surprise you to know that why has been shown by social work research to produce a lot of defensiveness in people. When you ask a why, it gets a because, and you are off to the races with the fight. I never ask why, I ask what. What are your concerns? That is the question. It is a civil, business-friendly way to get at the F word. Because in a business context, I'm not going to say, Darius, what are you feeling about this situation? It's invasive, it's inappropriate, it's corny, it's therapist. Nobody wants to hear that. But they do want to tell you their concerns. And if I hear the concerns, I play back the concerns, and then I think about a way. Is there a way that I could meet at least some of these concerns, demonstrate that I'm listening in a way that also gets me what I want and need, right? And that I find is the key to sort of taking out the emotional barriers to the deal so that then you can really deal with the stuff that's at stake, right? You got to clear that emotional brush so that you can figure out what the real barriers, other than the emotion, are to that deal.
I love that. So yeah, it's really interesting what it's all around. Like, I just keep hearing as you keep going through this, it's like it keeps going back to what's in it for them. Like, what do they want? What are their needs? Like making it about the other person and being really like kind of getting your ego out of the way. Because I think like when we start to do the buts or the, well, I'm what's in it for me, that's ego. Ego is like, well, I got to win. So I'm going to like prove you wrong. I had a situation happen actually once. I hope my former business partners don't listen to this episode, but if they do, fuck it. Where we were negotiating, I was renegotiating a deal. We had done a joint venture, and then we negotiated into our main deal, and it was me and my brother and another one of my partners and the majority shareholder of our business, and we were just trying to get a deal done. There was no like I didn't have the perspective of winning. My perspective's always been like, hey, like especially if you got to be married to someone afterwards, there is no like I won that one. You never win that one fight. Like there is never, oh, I won that fight, I'm the winner. It's like, yeah, you're the loser. What happens next though? Because nobody ever wants to feel like they lost, right? So yeah. So like if I'm gonna buy a piece of real estate from you or something like that, and you like I never talk to you again, who cares, right? Like then it's may the best person win. That's a boxing match, right? But if I gotta have a boxing match with you and then sit down and have dinner with you every single night for the next like 20 years, then different story, right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the negotiation, we literally role played the negotiation because we wanted to make sure that we got the right deal that we wanted, that made sense. And so we were like thinking of all the different rebuttals and how we would, make it make sense. And at the end of the negotiation, one of my business partners says to the other, I knew you'd say that. And like this at the end, we had already like agreed on everything. And he said something like, I won. It was like, I was insanity what came out of his mouth. And by the way, he was on my side of the negotiation, and he said that, and I looked, and I was like,
oh my God.
I'm like, you just totally fucked us, man. And so, about an hour later, my other business partner called him up and was just like, oh yeah, and he basically renegotiated. In this case, it cost us almost $10 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was a $10 million. It was a $10 million I won.
Yeah. Can we talk about winning and losing for just a second?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. People love to win. I put one caveat on that. They don't want to win too quickly, because if they do, there's a phenomenon called winner's curse, whereby if I ask you for something and you give it to me immediately, I think like, oh, damn, I should have asked for much more. Right. So sometimes frequently, you want to be very attentive to pacing, because look, I believe in giving people what they need, Darius. And if people like to feel like they got a win from me and they made me suffer a little bit, then I'm going to take a little bit of extra time, even if it's something I know I'm going to say yes to, to be like hem and haw and really think about it and slow it down so that when they finally do get that thing, they accept it. The other thing about losing is you know that human beings are very averse to losing. There's a phenomenon called loss aversion.
Right.
Humans will run away from loss faster than they will move toward a gain. There's all sorts of reasons for that, right? So number one, you can use that psychology in a couple of ways, right? Number one, don't do what your partner did. Never make people feel like they are losing because it feels like they are being stripped of dignity, right? And so that is the fastest way to screw something up. But you can use people's fear of loss in framing and teaching people how to value the services you're providing, right? Every day we don't do this, we are losing X, Y, or Z can sometimes be a more powerful motivator than if we do this, we will gain X, right? So thinking about how you frame an offer or a product or a service or a request can help you use the psychology of loss aversion to get what you need and psychologically convince the other person to invest.
I love that, and I hadn't thought about that. Like the to your point, right? We are wired against loss aversion because it's in our former lives and as cave people, like, hey, if I don't eat that food
Yes.
now, I may not eat for another week or two, right?
Right.
So it's in our DNA. What are your thoughts, like going back to you're in the middle of negotiations and you're having a tough negotiation with a deal that you got to get done, but the person on the other side of the table, I'm going to use a real life example right now, and I got to watch what I say because I'm under NDA.
Okay.
I'm in a deal right now where, like, probably the people who negotiated, at least from an LOI perspective, we're deeper into the next part of the deal, but where we're trying to do final docs. But the LOI, they just negotiated a deal that, like, as we go deeper and deeper into the deal, we're like, this just doesn't make as much sense, right? But we we want it. I love the counterparty, but I just don't like the deal. And I found that this seems to happen a lot, at least in I'm noticing it in private equity. I'm new to private equity. I was an operator before this, that people are so aggressive negotiating deals sometimes because they feel like there's an inflated sense of self-worth, right? And then we're on the other side of the deal where we're trying to do the next part of the deal. And I'm just like, this just doesn't make sense. And I want to try to get to an outcome that makes sense for everybody. But I know that they were so headstrong about their worth up front that for me to go back to them and be like, hey man, I know you think your kid should be on the cover of like Gerber's like baby food commercials, but like the kid's got like 3 eyes. I'm sorry. Like there's no one that's going to buy, like it's got 3 eyes. It's a beautiful child. I know it's your child, but like no one else will put this kid on any commercials. How do you go back to someone and say, look, we'd love to do business with you, but like the deal that you asked for that we went in initially as we got more information just doesn't make sense. And like, there's the only way it's going to make sense is going to be dramatically different than what we originally agreed to. And what I look at that and I go, this is probably going to die. Like I look at that and that's at least how I feel about it. I don't know. How do you, like, what you being an expert negotiator, if I came to you and said, hey, I have this problem, how would you tell me to approach it?
Yeah. Okay. So first, from I'm going to tell you in a minute something I liked that you did a lot, or that you said. And first, I'm going to give you some thoughts. So my first thought, is figuring out both their fallback position and your fallback position, right? Because we always have choices. We have choices all the time about whether to do deals at all or to do them at what level or on what metrics, right? And so I would spend a little bit of time. You probably know this right now off the top of your head, what your fallback is if there's no deal, right? If there's no deal, what happens for you? What are the consequences? What's the fallout? What's the blowback? Maybe nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then for them, what are the consequences if they don't have a deal, right? And some of that depends on the level of information you have, which is part of the reason why questions are the underutilized superpower in negotiation. The more open questions you ask up front, right? Even if not all of them get answered with candor, the better you're able to listen, the more you're going to pick up those little vocal leaks, right? That let you know what's at stake for somebody, or even how close you are to the real number. Even if there's puffery, right? And somebody gets in and they're like, well, Alex, this is absolutely ridiculous what you're proposing. But I see that they're writing the number down on their paper and staring at it. I know they're thinking about it. I'm not that far off, right? The bluster's there, but your body language is telling me a different story, right? So first thing I would say, figure out their fallback, pay attention to some of those vocal leaks and the body language, right? And then once you have a sense of that, I was going to say, I absolutely love your framing of love you, don't love the deal as it currently is, right? And if you want to tweak it slightly, you could take out the word don't, right? Love you. In order to do a deal, here's what we're seeing, okay? Here's what we're seeing. And what this leads us to is it's really these metrics that are going to get the deal done, right? You've painted a picture of this, and it's the picture we'd all love to be true, but looking at the metrics, it's not the picture that I think is true at this time. And therefore, if we're doing this deal, here's where the deal would have to be, right? And the key is, right, when I'm helping people negotiate, I like to say, my job as a mediator, if I'm working between two sides, is to figure out how to keep them at the table long enough so that you see the best deal possible. Because when you can see the best deal possible, then I've given you the gift of information and you will be able to make the best informed decision. Likewise, when you are negotiating for yourself, you want to try to figure out what's called the ZOPA, right? The zone of possible agreement, and to figure out how far you can push if you need the deal without giving them the walkaway number. Or if you're ambivalent about the deal, where you want to push to figure out the best version that's possible so that you, Darius, can figure out, okay, here's the final version. We've gotten through the bluster and the emotion. Here's the final version. Is it up or down for me? Right? I love them. Do I love this deal? And then you'll be able to make that answer.
Oh, I love that. Such good feedback. I'm like, my brain's like cranking through the deal right now.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
This is great.
So good.
And I think this is best for the listeners too, right? Because we're working through a real problem in real time. And a lot of you may be facing something similar on whatever scale that maybe you're going to be able to work through in real time.
Exactly. Look, we're running short on time here, and I told you I only had one prepared question, and then I realized I'm like, I had Chris Voss on the show a couple years ago, and I asked him this question. I'm like, oh, I got to ask Alex this question because if you're an expert negotiator, you're going to have an opinion on this. So before I go to the greatness question, and I can't wait to plug all where people can connect with you and get all your work. I want to ask you one specific question on negotiation, and then we'll go to the greatness question. And in between that, we'll tell people where they can find you. So I know I had a friend a few years ago, he Harvard Business School guy, and I was going through this really gnarly negotiation. And he said to me, he's like, well, what's your BATNA? And I said, well, what's a BATNA? He said, it's best alternative to negotiated agreement. And I was like, oh, I never heard that term before. And I started thinking about it. And I always, so I asked Chris Voss his perspective on this when he was on the show. I said, well, what's your opinion on BATNA? I'd love, Alex, for you to give me your opinion on BATNA. Are you a believer in BATNA? Are you against it, for it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And in fact, I was referring to what I think is a more clear version of BATNA when I talked about your fallback position. The thing I would say about BATNA, so it stands for best alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? So in other words, if you're not getting this deal done, right? What's your best alternative? The thing is, Darius, that I find coming up with the best alternative requires accurate risk assessment. And most human beings are not great at assessing risk, right? We may have all sorts of cognitive bias that gets in the way. We've spent a lot of time living with our side of the issue and very little time being able to put ourselves on the other side of the issue and asking ourselves the hard question, right? So I would say that self-awareness is absolutely key. I would say my advice to any negotiator is you need to nail down how you are assessing risk. And part of that is having the mental discipline to spend some time thinking about the weaknesses of your case, the frailties of your own business proposition, right? Your own blind spots as a negotiator so that you are best prepared to assess your own risk and come up, maybe not with the BATNA. When I teach BATNA to students, I tell them, first of all, never use this acronym with anybody. It makes you sound like a tryhard, and it's the opposite of what you want to do in a negotiation, right? Never say BATNA. Okay. But since I'm teaching it, I say to them, if you're going to think about your BATNA, I want you to think about your WATNA. What's the worst alternative to this negotiated agreement? What's everything that could go wrong? Or maybe, how about your BLATNA? What's your best likely alternative? Sometimes I ask people, if you don't negotiate this deal, what happens? And they're like, I'll tell you what's going to happen, Alex. I'm going to go before the judge and he's going to give me $10 million of punitive damages. And I say, great, you could also win the Powerball. Let's talk about what's in the realm of the likely,
Right.
So thinking about that. The other thing you need to do is to do enough listening and enough asking questions that you can crawl into the brain space of the other person and have an even better sense of the risks they're facing than they might have themselves, right? And so really what it comes down to is self-awareness and risk assessment. Put aside all the acronyms. If you master those two things, you're going to be in a really good position to figure out, do I do this deal? And if I do, at what level do I do it?
I love that. I really like one of the things that like my aha moment of this entire interview is this perspective of obviously what's in it for them, but helping understand their risk, empathizing with their risk. Even I don't know if that's the exact word I would use, but like there's this perspective of like, well, what's in it for them and what's maybe not in it for them if this doesn't happen? How might they react to that? And figuring out ways to maybe educate them on that in a way that doesn't look self-serving,
That, what you just said, educating them on that in a way that doesn't feel self-serving is it in a nutshell. And I know this as a mediator. I can't educate before I hear, I see, and I understand. When I am negotiating with people through those last really tough stages of the deal, I'm not doing that at 9:30 in the morning. I'm doing that at 4 in the afternoon after I have put in the work, getting to know them personally, their business, their pressure points, their fears, their anxieties. I can't do that until I have earned the right. And if you think that's tough as a mediator, when you're not the opposing party, it's a hell of a lot tougher to do that as the quote unquote opposing party. So what I like to do is from the beginning, establish that we're partners, right? Part of my job is to assess my own risk. Part of my job is to help you avoid risk, because ultimately, if we both avoid the landmines, that's when we're going to make a lot of money together and have a great time doing it. If you set it up with that partnership from the front and really drill down and try to approach it that way, even when times get tough, you will earn the right to educate somebody. Even if they don't want to hear it in the moment and they get pissed off, they may come back to you, think about it, do some research, and accept that deal.
Oh, amazing. My gosh, we're out of time, but I'm going to make time for the greatness question. That's for sure. But before we go there, what I'd love, Alex, for folks that want to like get your book, learn more, maybe even potentially work with you or any of the stuff that you're doing, where can they find out more about you? Where can they get the book? Where can they maybe work with you directly? Please, I'd love for you to educate the audience.
Yeah, thank you. So, I love to help people with all different range of means. So if you are, at a company, an institution, a corporation, right, and you'd like to learn how to level up your negotiation to make more deals and avoid loss, come find me at alexcarterasks.com. And I have a lot of information there about services my team and I provide. more information on the book, Ask for More, and it can be found everywhere, right? On everywhere books are sold online, you can find Ask for More and read the reviews there. If you are not in a position, right, of purchasing power to work at that level, I still want to help you have the best negotiation skills and abilities possible. Come follow me on social. I give a ton of negotiation advice. You can find me on LinkedIn every day. You can find me on Instagram at Alexandra B. Carter. I also have a newsletter. I'm too busy to spam people, I promise. And so about once a month, I offer free negotiation content. You can access that through the site.
Awesome. And I'm going to tell you, being a recipient of a lot of your social stuff, you have great social, and the audience needs to just go follow you everywhere. So we'll make sure we put all that in the show notes, but you guys need to go check out Alex. So it's alexcarterasks.com, and she's available on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that great stuff. So I highly recommend you guys check out her social, because I've been following her for about 2 years now, and I love it. It's great stuff.
Hey, thanks.
So you ready for the greatness question, Alex?
Yeah, sure.
All right, here we go. What is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
Prioritizing other people's hopes and expectations for me over my own joy and what I want to contribute to this world. So a number of years ago, I was asked by a really prestigious legal textbook company to write the textbook in my field. And I said yes, because I thought this is what a law professor should do, right? This is what I should do. This is great. It'll be prestigious. It's the next step. And I woke up every morning feeling absolutely dead inside. With everything in my being, I did not want to write this textbook. And so I took a tremendous risk, and I wrote them back, and I said, with respect, I'm going to have to decline this. And I didn't know what I was declining it for at the time. But then I needed to have a really serious surgery on my foot. I took a sabbatical from work. And after 6 weeks of lying in a rented hospital bed, I sat up one morning, grabbed my computer, and in 45 minutes, I wrote the outline of what would become Ask for More. It is not typical of a law professor, especially at an institution like mine, to write what some professors would call an airport book, right? A book for the masses, a book that is not just for legal academia, a book for regular professionals. But I knew that this was what I was called to do. It's what I was excited to do. And I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but it's been beyond my wildest dreams in terms of the impact I've been able to have on millions of people all around the world, but also what it's done for me, my business, and my family. So really, I would say for a lot of us overachievers out there, the moment you can drop what you think other people want for your life and focus on only doing what only you can do, that's the moment you're going to experience greatness.
I love that. Alex Carter, you are such a beast and such a badass, and so excited to get to do this show and to learn from you. And I'm so excited to check out all your work and especially read your book. I haven't read it yet, and that's next on my list. So looking forward to that. And man, so much gratitude having you here on the show today. Thank you so much.
This has been a blast. I'm happy to do it anytime.
All right. Well, I'm going to probably hold you to that.
We'll do one after your deal, right?
Right.
And then we'll have a little anonymized postmortem.
Sounds good. You guys, go check out all the work Alex is doing, and please share this episode. This is an episode all people need to hear, whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, just someone trying to get ahead in life. Negotiation is just a natural part of life, and Alex is obviously a special human in what she does and what she teaches, and thank you so much again. So grateful to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.